Okay, hello viewers, and welcome to Chapter 0 Prologue of Death Mage. The ship that the students of Yasaka High School were on for their field trip sank due to a bomb planted by terrorists. In this tragic incident, 102 casualties, crewmen, and passengers lost their lives, not counting the terrorists. Seeing that the cold, salty water has disappeared, I guess I've died as well. Amamiya Hiruto felt a deep numbness as he became aware of his own death. He was in a faintly lit place, and there were a lot of other people gathered here as well. It wasn't as simple as floating in the Sanzu River, with beautiful fields of flowers awaiting them on the other side. But this was likely something like the entrance to the afterlife. The other people were showing a variety of reactions to being dead. Some were crying, some consoling each other, and others were showing relief that their friends or loved ones weren't here with them. Hiruto, too, wanted to cry out that he didn't want to die, that he wanted to keep living, but he couldn't muster the energy to do so. In the end, I died in vain. The reason he said that was that he had spotted a female classmate sitting in the spot a short distance away from him. She was Naruse Narumi. She was the mood maker of the class, known by her nickname Naru. Hiruto had died to save her. When the ship lurched and began to capsize, Narumi had failed to grab hold of a handrail and looked like she was going to fall. Hiruto had seized her hand immediately and helped her grab the handrail. And then he had rolled down the diagonally inclined floor in her place, landed on his back against the wall, and fallen into the sea to drown. It had happened in an instant. It was not been something that he had thought about and decided on doing. Thinking about it now, it seemed like a reckless thing to do. Even so, if she had been saved by his actions, he would at least have been able to console himself. But no, I think I acted like a good person before I died. Even if Hiruto died, nobody would mourn for him anyway. He had lost his parents when he was young, and he had no blood-related siblings. He had a poor relationship with his uncle's family on his father's side, who had adopted him. He had been told, "Get out after you graduate high school." He didn't have any friends or a girlfriend. His uncle would be receiving the remainders of Hiruto's inheritance from his parents and condolence money for this incident, so he could consider the favor of adopting him as having been repaid. In fact, it was more than enough repayment concerning his uncle's abuse, the clear discrimination from his own biological children, the way Hiruto had been treated until now. His dreams of the future had only consisted of something vague like, become happy. It would be fine if that dream would be granted in heaven at the very least. His uncle and that family wouldn't be here. However, reality was irrational and not so lenient. You souls who have lost your lives once already, you have been chosen. I will now grant you special power, a new destiny, and a new fortune. Using these, I wish for you to live new lives in a world separate from the earth you lived on. Gods were probably these kinds of beings, a mysterious person with a halo over his head, and made this declaration to the people here. It seemed that instead of heaven, what awaited them was an endless cycle of transmigration. They were further surprised at the news that they would be reborn into another world. Of course, you may refuse my request. If you choose to do so, you will lose all memories of your previous life and be reborn somewhere else on Earth, as is normal. Those of you who hope for this, I would like you to come forward now. Hiruto wondered who would refuse in this situation, but there was one boy who refused. Hiruto was a little far away from that boy, so he was unable to hear what the boy said to the god, but the god said, "Well then, you may return to the normal circle of transmigration." And the boy disappeared, so he knew that the boy had refused the god's offer. Of course, Hiruto, like the rest of the people here, were intending to accept the god's offer. They would receive some special power, be born in a new world to a new family, and be happy. No other scenario could offer more hope than this.
Well then, as I call your name, please come and stand in front of me. Endo Koya. Shihyun Mari. Naruze Narumi. Kaito Kanata. Minami Asagi.
One after another, they had their names called out and received their special powers, destinies, and fortunes from the god before leaving the room. Narumi's name was called out too. But now about half of the people had already left, and Hiruto's name was still not being called. Amamiya Hiruto. For a moment, Hiruto thought he had been called, but it seemed that wasn't the case. Someone with a very similar name stepped forward to stand in front of the god. Amimiya? It was a name that Hiruto had never heard before. Even if they were in different classes, they were in the same school, so it seemed unlikely that he didn't know someone with such a similar name. Was it a passenger who happened to be riding on the ship at the same time as them? Or was it one of the crew? He looked like he was in his late teenage years. Even their physique was similar. If even their faces were similar, surely he must be Hiruto's doppelganger or some long-lost sibling. The others had received 1 or 2, at most 3, special powers from the god. As Hiruto observed, Amamiya Hiruto received no fewer than 7 special powers. They were quite large powers too. There were even 2 destinies and 2 fortunes, but the god combined them into 1 before handing them to him. To receive not just 2, but 7 special powers, the god must truly love this person. As this thought occurred to Hiruto, the god continued calling out the next person, and soon, Hiruto was the only one left. You are? Finally, the god noticed Hiruto. I'm Amamiya Hiruto. The god sounded puzzled, so Hiruto told him his name. However, this only seemed to surprise the god further. Amamiya Hiruto, not Amimiya Hiruto? Amimiya? Your surname is Amamiya, written as Shrine of Heaven, and your given name is Hiruto, written as Knowledgeable Person. That's right. With a bad feeling, Hiruto gave this answer to the god, confirming the spelling of his name, and then the god gave a groan.
Oh dear, your names are similar, so I made a mistake. I thought you and Amamiya Hiruto were
Amimiya, I can't even say it.
Amimiya Hiruto were the same person. All of the special powers that were supposed to be given to you, I unfortunately gave them to Amimiya Hiruto. And even the destiny that was supposed to be given to you, and the good fortune that was to keep you safe, I have given to him.
It was an honest mistake that had occurred through pure coincidence. The time that Hiruto at first thought his name had been called, it seemed to have occurred then. But Amimiya Hiruto is no longer here, so I can... Oh, it's God's voice, sorry.
But Amimiya Hiruto is no longer here, so I cannot have him return your share, nor can I prepare new powers for you. The same goes for your destiny and fortune.
So in other words, I'm the only one who is to start from zero with nothing?
No, you will be starting from a negative position. You will never be saved by destiny or coincidence, nor will you ever be blessed with good fortune.
Not even a start from zero, but a negative start. Wasn't this a little too much?
In that case, I'll give up on it.
Oh, wrong voice. In that case, I'll give up on this. Please return me to the normal circle of transmigration like the other person earlier. Even if he were to be reborn into a new world, it seemed now that he would face only hardships, so Hiruto was ready to completely give up on this rebirth. But the god shook his head.
The time of confirming your intentions has already passed.
Are you serious? Hiruto no longer had the ability to refuse. He was ready to raise his objections, to say that these kind of rules couldn't exist. But his body began to be surrounded in light and his consciousness started fading away.
It seems that your time for your rebirth has come.
No way! Isn't it too much for me to be the only one to start with nothing?
In exchange, your soul has a large, empty frame that is different from the others that are being reborn. In place of special powers, this empty frame will likely contain a tremendous amount of mana within your body. Though since you have no aptitude for magic, you will not be able to learn any of the magical attributes that exist in this world you are about to be reborn into, Origin. Therefore, it will be quite wasted on you.
Are those supposed to be words of comfort? To have mana and not be able to use magic? It really is a complete waste.
I do feel terrible for you. Without special powers, a destiny, or fortune, I am sure you will experience many hardships. You will be unable to grow up in a happy environment. Your future prospects will also be limited because you cannot use magic. You will be tormented by an even greater sense of loneliness than you experienced in your previous life. In your hopelessness, you will struggle to breathe and suffer greatly. But I want you to look forward and live on without giving up or resenting anyone.
You make it sound so easy. Without even being able to shout his protest, Amamiya Hiruto began his second life. The god Rodcourt, the new world he had sent Hiruto and the others, was called Origin. It was similar to Earth, but it was a world where science and magic blended into each other. The 100 people reborn in Origin were in wonder at the difference between this world and Earth. They were born to new parents, saved by various moments of good fortune, made use of the special powers they had been granted, and reunited with each other and recognized one another through their destinies. They kept their rebirth a secret amongst themselves, but before they knew it, they were known as the 100 Heroes, excluding the 101st person. Rodcourt was the god who ruled over this circle of transmigration. For the souls of many worlds, including Earth and Origin, he was not directly worshipped by the people, and he didn't entrust anything to clergymen, nor was he able to directly intervene by descending onto a world to perform miracles. What he was capable of doing was controlling the circle of transmigration of souls, and very occasionally altering it. However, he had almost never made any alterations to the circle before. This was because the system of the circle of transmigration was very well made. There were almost no situations that required Rodcourt to adjust it. However, a problem had occurred recently. The circle of transmigration for one of the worlds that he managed was slower than those of the other worlds. While the other worlds were proceeding as normal, this problematic world had come to a standstill for quite some time. Okay, and that is a very big advertisement. Okay. Magic, martial arts, literature, science, engineering, art, cuisine. A repetitive pattern was occurring in a wide variety of fields where development would happen, but then be lost soon after. The countries repeatedly went to war with one another. 1,000 years passed with no progress to show for it. From time to time, a hero would appear, and one of two smaller countries that had been at war would win and absorb the loser to form a single, larger country. But such larger countries were unable to unify properly and eventually divided, giving rise to conflict once again. Walkie Slush, thank you in chat for those. Even when countries were able to maintain peace between each other, incidents like the appearance of powerful demons caused even greater casualties than war. There existed gods who directly controlled that world and led its people. However, to protect the world from a demon king who had previously appeared in another world, they had to summon heroes from the other worlds and fight the demon king together with them. Ever since then, they had been unable to regain their former power. It was necessary for this world's advancements to continue through any means necessary. It was currently in a state of stagnation, but one event could trigger a sudden decline in development. As the world declined, fewer souls passed through the circle of transmigration, posing a danger even to Rodcourt. As Rodcourt wondered what to do, he heard rumors from gods who managed other worlds. The rumor was that if you took a soul from another world that retained all of their former memories, bestowed cheat-like powers upon them, and had them reborn into a world, that world would develop in a good direction at an alarming pace. Sorry if I'm messing with the mic. Okay. It was a rumor that he wanted to believe in. It seemed absurd to think that a single person with memories of their past life and cheat-like powers could have such a large influence on an entire world. Even so, it was worth testing. In the problematic world, the gods had summoned several heroes from other worlds to battle. The Demon King. It was direct summoning of living inhabitants of other worlds, so it had not received divine gifts such as cheat-like abilities. Even so, they were victorious against the Demon King. Furthermore, most of the heroes lost their lives in battle, but even in their short time on this world, they had made a lasting impact. And there would be no better time to test this rumor than now, when there were no demon kings or evil gods, with no events like battles between gods and abnormal beings that could challenge them. If heroes were granted cheat-like powers, they would surely have an even more profound impact on the world's development. Fortunately, using his position, Rodcourt could feed the souls of the dead back into the problematic world, causing their rebirth into that world as many times as he desired. It wasn't a difficult task to have them retain memories of their previous lives either. As for the cheat-like abilities, he could prepare them by using his ordinary god powers that he had been saving. However, he was uneasy with the idea of reincarnating only one person, just in case he should use 100 people. And with good timing, just as Rodcourt had finished his preparations, around 100 Japanese people died. According to what he'd heard, they were inhabitants of an island country with advanced knowledge of science and economics, as well as a peculiar culture. With nobody around to object, Rodcourt decided to exclude the souls of the evil people from among those of the Japanese people who had died on the ferry and reincarnate the rest. So he's talking about the terrorists that actually blew up the ferry that they were on. However, they would be reincarnated not only on the problematic world, but in Origin. So, what's happening here is Rodcourt's going to take the Japanese people and put them on Origin as a tutorial world, essentially, and then they're going to go to a world that's very problematic. So he's going to use them as a tool, pretty much, to fix this other world for his own gain. For the purpose of executing his plan perfectly, Rodcourt chose Origin as a place where the souls could live through a practice run. There's the tutorial part. So that they could accumulate knowledge and experience. Once these souls completed their second lives in Origin, he would grant them new powers and destinies once more, and have them reincarnated again on this problematic world. With this much time and effort spent on this plan, it would surely go well. However, not being used to having to do such tasks, Rodcourt had made one small error. Even a god could not pretend that this error would cause his expectations to come crashing down one day. As if foreshadowing such events, a soul appeared before Rodcourt, having finished its second life. Rodcourt had experienced some differences in their timings depending on the order in which he had reincarnated them, but given the expected lifespan of a human, this was far too quick for a reunion. However, he had predicted that this soul would be the first to appear.
As I expected, you were unable to complete your entire lifespan, Amamiya Hiruto.
The one that had appeared was the 101st reincarnated soul. Without any power, destiny, or fortune. It was the soul of Amamiya Hiruto. The soul of Amamiya Hiruto that had appeared before Rodcourt was pitifully wounded and covered in sinister mana.
I'll kill them. I'll kill those guys. Even if I'm reborn, I'll never forgive them. That goes for you as well.
With no care for the fact that Rodcourt was a god, Hiruto threw a punch at him. Amamiya Hiruto was born in a military state in Origin. Rodcourt had told him that he would never live a blessed life. Those words became reality. He experienced nothing but misfortune from the moment he was born. His mother... Okay, we got another advertisement. Get that out of there. His mother was a prostitute, and his real father had abandoned her before he was born. His mother found a new lover who made the decision to sell the baby, Hiruto, to buy alcohol, to which she didn't object. The ones who bought Hiruto was a laboratory that carried out illegal research as he was examined there. It became clear that he was more inept at magic than any ordinary person in Origin. In Origin, there were 7 attributes of magic that could be used: the 4 elements of earth, water, fire, and air, as well as the additional attributes of light, life, and spatial magic. It was common knowledge that everyone had at least one attribute out of those 7 that they had an affinity for. However, Hiruto demonstrated no aptitude for any attribute whatsoever, let alone any affinity. In other words, he was an existence that defied logic, inferior to even an ordinary person. But the people of the laboratory realized that Hiruto owned a vast mana pool that was far greater than that of an ordinary person. He had incredible amounts of mana even though he had no aptitude for any attribute. This was a bizarre contradiction in the eyes of the researchers, and among them, one suddenly came up with an idea. It's not that this experimental subject... I don't know what voice we should do. Let's give him a German voice. I'm pretty sure there's German researchers here, since I read a little bit, so I'll give him like a Germany one. It's not that this experimental subject has no affinity for any attribute. Rather, there's another attribute that we've not discovered that this subject has an affinity for. Isn't that possible? From that point, their research began. It was around then that Hiruto's memories of his previous life returned. After several years of research with Hiruto as a human subject, they discovered the 8th attribute, the attribute of death. The researchers had Hiruto learn the death attribute magic that they had discovered and reconstructed his entire body, including his brain, to continue their research and experiments. Die! However, the circumstances that Hiruto was in ended with one word. When he had regained his memories of his previous life, his body was filled with explosives. His life had been taken hostage, and around him were the researchers that viewed him as not a human being, but as an experimental animal. Hiruto no longer needed basic education such as language or how to read and write, but he had no freedom whatsoever. Not only that, if he showed any signs of rebellion, he would receive an electrical shock and be left convulsing on the floor. He spent his days eating food that was nutritious, yet more plain than food fed to prisoners, and doing exactly as the researchers instructed him in whatever experiments they desired to carry out. Sorry about that. Even though he had awakened his ability to use death attribute magic, he couldn't leave the laboratory. Hiruto covered his body in death attribute magic and desperately gathered power in his hand. Completely inept with any other attribute of magic, through sheer effort, he covered himself in death attribute magic. He developed many different uses for his magic, contributing towards the laboratory, the researchers, and the country they belonged to. However, right until the end, Hiruto's work went unrewarded. This was because the researchers were aware of his usefulness to them, but they also feared his insubordination. As Hiruto's usefulness increased, this fear also grew. The explosives in his body were buried not only in the heart, but also in the brain. His torso housed GPS to prevent his escape. His right eyeball had been replaced by an artificial eye containing a special camera, and a listening device was planted in his mouth and ears to catch even the smallest whisper. His food intake was limited so that he would never have more physical strength than necessary. His room was small that he was never allowed to leave it except for experiments. To make him more able to use death attribute magic, I don't know why I'm calling it music. To increase the size of his mana pool, they reconstructed his body for a variety of reasons. In order to ensure that he wouldn't somehow make an ally to plan an escape or rebellion, the guards who watched him and the operator that gave them direct orders were rotated often, so that he wouldn't be in contact with any individual in particular for any extended a period of time. And finally, they carried out an inhumane procedure on his brain, cutting off his control over his body's mana and making him their puppet. At this time, Hiruto wasn't even 10 years old, and from this age, he spent over 10 more years in the hell where he couldn't even move a single finger on his own accord. Even after about 10 years of this situation, Hiruto's mind did not cave in. A reason for that would be the souls of the dead that he had been attracted to his affinity for the death attribute, who whispered comforting words to him. Another reason was that he had hoped that they would come to rescue him from this hell. However, Hiruto died. He was unable to withstand the reckless experiments carried out by the newer researchers who were trying to surpass the results produced by their predecessors. It was ironic that through death, Hiruto regained his freedom. Through the death of his body, his soul regained its control over his mana. Hiruto turned his own body into an undead to go on a rampage, fueled by his hatred. He tore those who had toyed with his life to pieces and squeezed the researchers that begged for their lives, as if they were pieces of wet cloth. He made sport of the military personnel as he killed them. As Hiruto continued rampaging after killing everyone in the laboratory, not satisfied with his revenge, familiar faces appeared before him. "Oh!" Hiruto raised his voice in joy at the sight of these dozens of people, as their faces were familiar to him. Their features were a little different, but most of them were his classmates in the same year as him in his previous life. He knew some of them as his teachers. Naruse Narumi was among them as well. They were Hiruto's companions, who had been reincarnated in origin with him. They were his hope. One day, they would definitely find him. They would definitely come to rescue him. For the past 20 years, Hiruto had never stopped believing that. They were a little late, but he wasn't one to complain. Let's celebrate our reunion. Let's redo our second lives. I'm sure it's possible now that all these companions are here, he thought. Trembling in joy, Hiruto took one step towards them. Everyone, commence attack! However, at the command of a young man who appeared to be the leader of his companions, Hiruto was struck by simultaneously released magical attacks. That was a weird sentence. "Wait! Why are you attacking me? I'm your ally. I'm one of your companions." Hiruto's screams were drowned out by blazing hellfire. Blaze of wind, piercing cold, and devastating lightning. Hiruto, who had approached his companions with no thoughts of defending himself, was completely bewildered as he fell. His body fatally wounded. That was surprisingly quick, considering that we heard that a powerful undead was risen. "Where there's 30 of us, 100. There's 30 out of the 100 heroes gathered here. There's no way we'd have trouble with that." Above Hiruto's head, familiar voices were having a conversation. 100 people? 100 people, you said? No, there were 101 of us, including me. There's 101. He wanted to shout those words, but his throat had already been cut. He could not even let out a moan. His right arm was completely burned and blackened. His left arm had been flying off somewhere. His legs had been torn off at some point. He could see his left leg in the corner of his vision. His head and torso were in a terrible state as well. The reason we didn't have any trouble is because this undead let its guard down. Death attribute magic. What a terrifying magic. Looking at the direction of this voice, with the only eyeball that he could move, Hiruto saw... That's a girl? Fine, I'll redo it. The reason we didn't have any trouble is because this undead let its guard down. Death attribute magic? What a terrifying magic. I don't know, fucking a girl's voice, whatever. Looking at the direction of his voice, with the only eyeball that he could move, Hiruto saw Naruse Narumi standing there. She had matured more than she had in her previous life. She was now an adult woman. One sec.
Ah, he's another victim of this laboratory.
Next to her stood a young man, the leader who had given the attack command. It's so hard. They don't give a name, so I'm kind of coming up with voices. I'm pretty sure it was, he's another victim of this laboratory. Next to her stood a young man, the leader who had given the attack command. Judging from the distance between them, he knew that this man and Narumi were intimate with each other. I'm sure he wants to kill him. I'm sure he wants us to kill him.
You're right, Hiruto.
Hiruto? Hiruto? Amemiya Hiruto? This guy is Amemiya Hiruto. Let's at least finish him off. Oh, wait.
Let's at least finish him off so that he doesn't have to suffer anymore.
That's the best thing we can do for him now. Narumi, let's do it together.
Don't fuck with me! Why the hell are you the one standing there? You, who took my share of power, destiny, and fortune. Why are you trying to finish me off with such a heroic look on your face? Why is it you? Why the fuck did it have to be you? It's all your fault that my second life was such a disaster. 100 heroes? You're treating me as an outcast and killing me. Hiruto let out a cry, but he was unable to withstand the bright light coming from the hands of Hiruto and Narumi and turned into dust. Everything is your fault! You call yourself a god? Second life my ass! You cast me into a hell even worse than my previous life. Hiruto's fist had a black fog-like substance coiling around it, but it didn't even graze Rodcourt. That was just the result of the difference in power between man and god.
I am aware that I did a terrible thing to you.
Saying the same thing as he said before, Rodcourt explained the circumstances he was facing to Hiruto's furious soul. The information was transmitted to him directly by some godly power and permeated through his mind in an instant.
So you're saying there's a third time? That is correct. This is something that has been prepared since you were first reborn in Origin. This time, you do not have the choice to refuse, and I cannot interrupt in it.
What absurd nonsense this was. However, to Hiruto, this nonsense was like finding a ship when he needed to cross. I see. Then, in the next world, I'll kill them. The ones who killed me. I won't leave any of them alive. I died first, right? In that case, I'm going to be the one who reincarnates for the second time first. So I'll have the advantage. This time, I'll be the one who kills them all. I'll become an adult before them, gain power, and then find Amemiya Hiruto and the other amongst the children and kill them all. That should be possible even for someone like me with no special power. Now hurry up and grant me all that stuff, Kami-sami. This time you've got a destiny and fortune for me, right? After all, I'm the one who died first. There's no way you're going to get me confused for someone else again, right?
I have no power to bestow upon you.
As if lightly pushing against Hiruto's soul, Rodcourt pressed his palm into Hiruto. Eh? With just that, Hiruto began to speed up and fall towards somewhere. At this
point, the only thing I can do is add something. I cannot give you a power.
Why? I'm the only one with nothing again. How is that possible?
Because I cannot allow you, the others to be killed by you.
Rodcourt spoke to Hiruto as he grew smaller and smaller, apologizing.
If you kill the others, the world's development will be hindered. Your death on Origin was the product of a great amount of misfortune. The same goes for the fact that Amemiya Hiruto and the others were unaware of your existence. Even until the very end, but even if I say that, you will not be satisfied.
After Hiruto had died on the ship, before he was reincarnated, he had been standing at the edge where all of the souls had been gathered. Because of that, nobody had seen Hiruto. Furthermore, there had only been one person who refused to be reincarnated in a new world, and the final point was that he had been the very last person to be reincarnated. Because of these things, Amemiya Hiruto and the others had explained his absence by thinking, "He must have somehow survived and didn't die with us," or "He must have refused to be reincarnated like the other person." In addition, the repeated experiments on Hiruto's body had changed the shape of his face completely, to the point that Narumi had even been able to recognize him.
All of this misfortune was caused by my own clumsiness.
Sorry about that.
I wished for you to look forward and live on without giving up or resenting anyone. But unfortunately, you were put on a path that made that impossible. Though your discovery of death attribute magic and development of new magic, you contributed towards Origin's advancement. I hope that you can forgive me for being unable to repay you in any way and forcing you to endure a third life of misfortune.
But even as Hiruto's soul grew distant, Rodcourt could feel Hiruto telling him that this would never be forgiven.
Therefore, all I can do is to have you give up on your foolish revenge before you can commit any sins, and hope that you will quickly end your own life.
And then, in the palm of Rodcourt's hand, something like a ball of slime appeared. In the next moment, it hit Hiruto's body. As Hiruto screamed in agony in response to the violent pain, Rodcourt spoke.
"This is a curse. It can never be lifted. With this curse, you will never be able to gain new powers, even in this new world. However, I promise you that for your fourth life, I will erase all of your painful memories and return you to the normal circle of transmigration."
With no time to object to Rodcourt's undesirable promise, Hiruto's mind went blank.